Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm John Paul from Cannes. Cannes works exclusively with the UK public sector, and we're the world's only cost net negative media agency, as far as we know. But what that means is we've generated over 7 million in advertising revenue for the public sector, and this revenue can then be recycled into campaign budgets and outcomes. You may have heard of us as the people that run your programmatic advertising campaigns. We've run over 1,000 since 2014. Recycling is by far our most commonly briefed campaign type, and food waste is the most frequently requested recycling campaign type. So today we're in our second webinar in the Waste and Recycling Comms Group. We're zooming in on food waste. This series is designed to help you stay abreast of what's working in terms of nudging recycling behaviours and waste reduction behaviours across the UK. To every single episode, give you insights and tactics for things that you can apply in your work tomorrow. And we also wanted to act as a platform for sharing, not just for me and Dominic and the other people we work with, but for you as well, to share the good work that you're doing. And there'll be more of that to come soon. Today, we're looking at food waste, really sort of appreciating the enormity of the task. And then we'll be sharing some of Dominic Ridley-Moy's expertise with you. And we'll then be looking at some example food waste campaigns and giving you some free insight on that front. So why should we improve food waste communications? Whilst I'm talking about this, we're going to launch a quick poll to find out which of you in attendance today have food waste collections at the moment or don't. And we know that's all changing soon. Just so we can make sure that we're tailoring what we say to the audience. But generally, why are we zooming in on this subject? Well, firstly, it was the one that you told us in the largest numbers to cover. So we made it our next webinar. In various conversations we've had with local authorities across the UK, it appears to be the top contaminant generally in recycling. Solving the food waste problem has behavioural links to local economy, shopping local, shopping at buying smaller amounts, to your own health, and also has an impact on cost of living campaigns. So there's this connection between other things that the public sector do that I think is really worth looking at. It is something for all local authorities to look at, and it kind of affects all residents, which makes me think, I mean, is this the biggest campaign that there is out there in the public sector, the biggest communications objective? It's a hard task. Everyone can be involved and every local authority needs to do it. So with big tasks, the risks of wasting time and money are also big. Also, by optimizing large things, there's a much bigger impact than for maybe smaller, more targeted activities. So sharing what works, what doesn't, helping everyone avoid things that don't work, and making it easy to access things that do work, I think is really important. And looking first at the behavioural science around food waste must be a priority. Understanding the theories, but also understanding your audiences is absolutely essential to ensuring that you filter out opportunities for waste. You consume less, you target the right messages at the right people. Really getting beneath that is important. And so I recycled this quote from True Romance as a way of introducing Dominic, so I apologise for it. But in all seriousness, Dominic is someone who, whenever we work with him on a recycling or a behaviour change campaign, those campaigns have worked well. And that's because of his approach, his understanding, and his willingness to get in really under the skin of the challenges that we all face together. So without further ado, I will hand over to Dominic, and he's going to take you through kind of everything that he knows about food waste recycling. Over to you, mate.
Thank you for your kind words. Not quite everything, but we'll get through as much as we can in the time that we've got. So let me hopefully magically share my screen. screen. I should be able to do this by now. So I think that should be, I'm just going to move that off the screen there.
Just so you know, Dominic, we're looking at about a 50-50 split of people on this call who have food waste recycling and don't.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. All right. Well, I'll cover both. So if you've already got food waste recycling, don't worry. The stuff that I'm going to say about introducing it is still useful. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, my name's Dominic Ridley, and I run the Behaviour Change Network and help organisations apply behavioural insights to the challenges they face. So as John Paul said, I'm going to kick off today, and then John Paul's going to bring it more to life with some real life campaigns in practice. So I've been living and breathing food waste for the past year or so. So I've done a lot in this area recently and wanted to share some tips and advice with you, so some things that have worked well, some things that haven't worked well, all those kinds of things that you can use in your organisations. And I'm also going to be launching a new masterclass on food waste shortly. So the things that we don't have time to cover today, I will cover off in my masterclass, and I'll share more about that shortly. So today is all about introducing food waste collections. If you already have food waste collections, how you can increase those food waste recycling rates. And then thirdly, a bit about encouraging residents to reduce food waste. So those are the things we're going to cover off today. And then I'm going to hand over to John Paul to bring it to life in terms of actual campaigns. And if you've got any questions, do put them in the chat as we go along and we can pick those up. So I just wanted to stay a little bit to start off about the problem that we all face. So if you're not aware already, so these are stats from DEFRA. So the issue that we face today is that whilst recycling rates have increased overall, so from something like 11% to 42% between 2000 and 2021, they've plateaued around the 42 to 44% mark. So that's something that we all need to work together to tackle. And if you're not aware of it, the simpler recycling policy is the government's response to this challenge. And we're going to focus very much on food waste today. And I'm sure that many, if not all of you, will be aware that there's the impending deadline to introduce food waste collections by the end of March 2026. So just a little bit about where things are at the moment. So RAP's food waste tracker is a really, really useful source of information to see what's happening nationally. So do have a look at that if you're not using it already. So it last ran in 2023, and it looks at household attitudes around knowledge and behaviours relating to all things food. So here are some of the key findings. So self-reported food waste has decreased slightly, but as I say, it's still really high. So there's a lot of work to do there. Also, the main concern is still around the cost of food. So that is a big issue and continues to be the biggest issue. Food waste is still up there, but not quite as much as the cost of food. And this is really interesting because for me, it's similar to climate change. So with climate change and food waste, a lot of the time in behavioural terms, people get food waste, they get climate change, but it's the cost that is the thing that usually gets people to take action. So that can be more of a motivator than the environmental benefit. And also recall around food waste has also declined. So there's a gap about, there's an issue in terms of how much people recall information about reducing food waste. I think it's only 29%, so it's really, really low. But in some ways that's good for us because the knowledge gap is always the easiest one to reduce. So that's something we can certainly tackle. So for me, this is a really interesting statistic. So 90% of people are aware that food waste is an issue, but only 67% agree that they are making an effort to tackle this. And this can be quite common, this what we call the intention action gap. So where our intentions don't match our actions or our values don't match what we actually do. So despite having clear intentions and motivations, as many of us do, we don't always follow through. So, for example, you may say you're going to exercise, but instead you watch TV instead. So you don't always say what you're going to do. And there's lots of reasons for this. So what's going on in our environment, our emotions, the context in which we make decisions, whether it's a slow thinking decision or an automatic decision. So there's lots of things there that make a big difference, and we'll cover that off in a bit more detail as we go through. And also telling people why food waste is a bad thing isn't just enough to change behaviours, as you'll be well aware. As I just said, there's lots of things that drive our behaviour, lots of things that are at play. So if you've heard me speak before, this is the sort of process that I go through when I work with organisations, and something I encourage you to do, to spend a lot of time thinking about what is the behaviour or behaviours that you want to shift, what is the very actual problem you want to change, and we'll keep coming back to this, and thinking about how do you get that down to what it is you want to shift. So using things like surveys, focus groups, interviews, spending time with your waste composition analysis, which highlights what is been recycled, what isn't, all that kind of thing. So I'm just going to say a little bit about introducing food waste collections now, and this will be interesting as well if you already have food waste collections as well. So when you first introduce food waste collections, the thing I would say is there's a temptation to skimp on the comms, but I would avoid doing that. So using all the channels that you have at your disposal, so online, social media, leaflets, all that kind of thing. So to give you a bit of context, so RAP recommends spending around £1.50 per household on your comms. So that's a decent amount of money if you're rolling something out. And I think that's the thing that I would really focus on. So you do the basics very well. You plan out why you all the kind of key points that you want to get across to residents, why they should use food waste caddies, how to use a caddy, explain what can and can't be recycled, when will food waste be collected, and make sure you have this really clear plan. And I think the bit that I would say do not skimp on is the bit in advance of the campaign. So I think in terms of what you do, in terms of when you launch a new service and then tell people what to do, that's the bit that's probably easiest to do. But actually making sure you have that kind of teaser leaflet, that teaser campaign, it's really worth the investment. And for me, it's the thing that will mitigate any sort of backlash a lot and is really, really worth doing. And in terms of other things that you're going to do, you should do, we'll hear from John Paul later. And for me, programmatic is really, really useful. It's much more cost effective than other forms of advertising. And I'll let John Paul explain that a bit more. It can be very targeted. You can rebut things very quickly. So one of the things that is really important to have is when you're giving out caddies for the first time, so when you're going around your whole local authority area and you're giving out caddies, you will miss residents. So there will always be missed residents. So having a plan to make sure that they can report that they didn't get a caddy when you first roll it out is really important. And that's something that programmatic can help with, and lots of other things as well. So in terms of design, so I'm a big fan when you're designing all your comms to roll it out, or in later stages once you've got it in train. For me, using graphics, really easy to understand, clear design, making it as accessible as possible. So if there's lots of people, for instance, who don't speak English as their first language, it's really easy to understand. But just in terms of behavioural design, thinking about how you use images and graphics so that people can look at something, glance away and get the message really clearly. So spend a lot of time making your design clear and simple. And for me, again, if you've heard me speak before, I talk a lot about when you're designing for behaviour, it's making it attractive, but to draw people's attention in. So sometimes it's about having very clear, simple, easy to understand design, not necessarily too many colours, so that people think, if they look at something and look away, they get what it is that you want to do. So in this case, here's an example from a rollout I'm working on at the moment. So free food waste collections start from Monday the 10th of June on your usual collection day. So that's very much about that. What is that key thing we want to get across? And in this case, because caddy deliveries are happening over 2-3 months, we want to make sure that people aren't putting their caddies out before the service starts. So being very clear about that and what your kind of hierarchy of messages is. Consistency for me is also really, really important. So there's enough confusion around food waste and recycling, people not knowing what to do. So I'm a big fan of using a wrap iconography and keeping things consistent. So there's consistent messages across different local authorities, just to make it easier for people to do what you want them to do. And as you can see here, I think this is really clear and simple. So this is something that I would use as a preference. So those are some of the things to consider when you're rolling out food waste collections for the first time. And I'm going to move over to increasing food waste recycling rates. So once you've got your kind of collections in train, thinking about what are the kinds of things you can do to get those rates up. So for me, one of the key things is always thinking about what is the problem, and always spending as much time as you can in that insight phase, getting a picture of what the barriers are. So trying to do as much of this as you can. So interviews with residents, phone surveys, interviews with council staff. One thing that people don't do as much as they could do is shadowing bin collection rounds. So spending a day with your waste teams is really, really useful. I spend a lot of time walking around the estate, just seeing what's happening can be so invaluable. Workshops with residents, with staff. Also, I mean, I spend a lot of time looking at all the behaviour change literature out there, but that's something you can all do as well, looking at what's worked and what hasn't, and doing all those kinds of things first before you go to the solution, and that will make what you do so much more successful. So awareness for me is always a good place to start, and it's always the easiest. And we've heard earlier from the stats from RAP that awareness can be and is a big issue, and it's always the easiest behaviour to shift. So I always like to start there if I can. And with if you're rolling out food waste for the first time, there's always confusion about what you can and can't put into the recycling caddy. So it's a good place to start and reinforce that awareness. As I was saying earlier, there can be other barriers to why people don't do things. So what's happening in their environment? Emotions play a big part. Also, whether you're performing an automatic behaviour, so if your brain goes into automatic mode, or if it's using the conscious part of your brain, which is much more slow thinking. Very different behaviours, very different contexts. So how does this help us in practice? So one of the things that we don't always think about is timing. So where are people when they make a decision about food waste? What do they get at the time that they're making that decision? What comms is in front of them? So people are often by the bin or the kitchen when they're making decisions about what to do with food waste, or it could be at the supermarket actually, which we'll come back to. So one of the things that I've used a lot and can be really effective, those door hangers. So, for instance, reminding people who haven't put their food waste out 1 week to put it out the next week. And that message about everyone else is doing it can be really, really powerful. But also it does come down to what is the behaviour you're trying to shift. So asking people why are they not doing it and working out the problem. I've also had lots of success with bin stickers. So putting stickers on your caddies, telling people what you can and can't recycle is really, really useful. And also another issue is that people with food waste, they often think they're not going to bother because they don't have enough food waste, so it's not worth recycling because they don't have enough. So that's the barrier that's really worth thinking about and using in your comms, so you counter that barrier and say to people, you know, even if you've not got that much, it's still worth putting your caddy out. Another thing that I get asked a lot about is around incentives. So having some sort of reward system like lotteries or points-based systems. And I'd say there's mixed evidence around those kinds of things. I'm not necessarily sure how effective they are, rather than some of the kind of timely prompts that are in front of you when you're making that decision. So making it easy. So this is another thing that we can do and something we might not necessarily think about. So where you place the caddy on your kitchen worktop. So if you don't know what local authorities tend to do, there'll be an outdoor caddy and an indoor caddy. And with the indoor caddy, if you encourage residents to put it somewhere easy to access and easy to use, it will make it much more likely that they use it than if it's somewhere really difficult to use. And also things like the caddy liners. So having caddy liners can make a big difference. So that kind of yuck factor. So a lot of the time people think, oh well, I don't like the mess from food waste. So actually having that liner to prevent that mess makes a big difference. And also, as I said earlier, having stickers, they're quite easy to understand stickers that you can look away from, will make a big difference. And putting those on your food waste caddies, saying this is what you can recycle, this is what you can't. So another thing that I'm going to be looking at much more in the future is caddy design. So the standard caddies are quite functional, but some people, and these are comments, there's a food waste rollout I'm working on at the moment, and the sort of comments you will expect and you will get are things like, no way I'm using that, it's really ugly. So people don't necessarily like the standard caddy. So one of the things I'm going to be looking at is how you can use design and design caddies that are much more attractive, and basically counter that barrier. So if that's something you're interested in working on, do get in touch, because I'm looking for local authorities to partner up with on this. Okay, so I'm going to move to the final bit of my presentation now, which is all around reducing food waste. So before you kind of get to recycling your food waste, getting people to minimize what they do. So reducing food waste is a huge issue, and one of the biggest issues here is people cooking, preparing and serving too much food. And one of the campaigns that I've really been impressed with is, so if you've seen RAP's recent campaign on buying loose, I was just going to talk through that briefly, because I think that's a really good example of unpicking behaviour change. And if you get a chance, do read through their Unpacking Fresh Fruit and Veg, their behavioural insight study. Really fascinating, really robust, really in depth. And what they found is that one thing that will make a difference is telling people to buy loose, because people who are buying loose told them that they're wasting less food as a result. And I really like this, and I think it's really good, because it's always easier to focus on shifting one behaviour. So when I work with people, I always try and get them to hone in on one or two things, because the more you hone in on one behaviour, the more likely it is you'll get people to change what they do. And it's also a really good message for local authorities to get behind. So that message around kind of buying local, buying loose, and also during a cost of living crisis, people don't have a lot of money. That motivates people to change their behaviour. So that's a really good place to start. So if you do go down this route, just bear in mind some of the behavioural barriers. So sometimes people think that buying loose is more expensive, and then you get better deals with pre-packaged. People don't also plan enough, so they buy more than they need. Also, hygiene can be a bit of an issue. So people not liking the idea of other people touching their fruit and veg, that kind of thing. And also, it's interesting that packaging doesn't seem to be enough of a barrier to put people off. So it comes back to that. When it comes to the environment, actually cost can be the thing that gets people to take action rather than the environmental benefits. So what can we do in response? So there's lots of interventions based on behaviour change theory that can really help. So writing things down, planning, helping people to write a flexible meal plan, chunking things up, encouraging people to make a list of things that they need to get from the shops, sticking to that list, storing things in the fridge. So lots of us don't know that, I think in fact half the population, that the average UK fridge temperature is set at least 2 degrees too warm. So that's a big thing we can do to make food last for longer. And also there's lots of myths around kind of freezing things as well. So that's something we can do as well, lots of common misconceptions. So just going to do a very quick quiz. So I've got one question for everyone. Going to ask John Paul as well about. So it's just to illustrate the point. So how do you store potatoes? So I want to ask which you think is correct. So you should never store potatoes in the fridge. A cool, dry cupboard is best. So that's number one. Number two is storing potatoes in the fridge keeps them fresh for twice as long, or if you store potatoes in the fridge, it keeps them fresh for 3 times as long. So if you all want to vote about which statement is correct, and we'll see where we get to. Where do you store your potatoes, John Paul?
In a dry cupboard where I often find them growing into things, but I still eat them.
You still eat them?
Make them into mash.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see how people do.
Is that the right answer?
Has everyone voted, Danielle? Have we got more people voting? It'd be interesting to see what everyone says.
We're at 76 votes, 78. So just give it another couple of seconds.
There are some questions up above, Dom. One question was around the WRAP £1.50 spend. Is that for an area that's been doing food waste for years, or is it when you're launching a food waste service?
Oh, sorry, that's for launching. So it's okay. And it's per household. So it's £1.50 per household, and that's for basically for when you're launching it. But so I think if you're having a booster campaign, doing something not that far off is still useful though.
And Catherine was talking about, in funky caddy designs, but you then tied to one supplier. But I think there was an interesting response to that from the group about, you don't necessarily need to give them the caddy. They can buy the caddy themselves. They just need to get the behaviour around it. But when in your investigation so far into better caddy design, how do you get around that with the council? And could choice architecture be a neat way of getting people to invest rather than having it foisted upon them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that I'm in the early stages of looking at, which is why I want to kind of partner up with someone on some trials. So I mean, one of the things that I'm looking at doing is kind of how you cover them potentially. So I think the barrier there is making it as sustainable a material as possible.
Yeah.
But that's something that I'm looking at, kind of how you do some sort of vinyl wrap that is in a sustainable material. And that's the kind of thing that I'd be really keen to trial, because I think that would make a big difference potentially, rather than necessarily changing the caddy design.
Because Claire from Islington's interested in having a conversation about this. And you mentioned stickers earlier on. So there might be some angle to that. One thing I was thinking on that was, it's not so much the caddy that you're invested in, it's the food waste recycling. So if they have the caddy but then get their own or get a nicer one, or like that TikTok the suggestion from Sarnaj was that that there's something that attaches to the drawer. I think it's the habit that you want, not necessarily the individual thing that's been delivered to you, which I think is really interesting around that. And giving people the opportunity to choose and to tailor, I think creates it's not being foisted on you. It's not so much an edict. It's something that you choose to do. I love what you were saying about put it near the dishwasher, put it next to the chopping board. I think those are really sensible calls to action. Rather often the messages are like, doing food waste is good for the environment and it saves the council money. But as you're saying, it's not particularly motivational. But it being easy, attractive, I think is fascinating there. Are we happy with the quiz results?
Yeah, so we've got the results in, so which is interesting. So 68% said that you should store it, never store potatoes in the fridge. 18% said that storing it in the fridge keeps them fresh twice as long, and 14% said that it keeps them fresh for 3 times as long. So so the 68%, you were right a while ago. So the advice has now changed. So there was thinking that that storing it in the fridge could lead to the production of a chemical that I can't pronounce that is thought to increase the risk of cancer. But the advice has now changed from the Food Standards Agency, and actually keeping them fresh in the fridge, keeping them in the fridge will keep them fresh for 3 times as long. So that's something that we can definitely advise people to do. So that's just one of the many things. So there's lots of stats like that that are quite interesting. But I think for me, it's the one about the fridge. So the temperature of the fridge is something that people don't know about that much, about that you should be food in the fridge should be kept at below 5 degrees. So that's a really easy behaviour to change and something quickly we can do. So hopefully that was useful. I'm just going to...
That's very interesting. You've got Camilla who said, you talked about timely prompts and buying bins. How would you use this to your advantage? For example, would you suggest we work with retailers? Imagine this would have to be a national approach. Well, that's very interesting you say that. I think connecting people on landing pages to, for example, a subscribe and save link for caddy liners could be, is one of those things that would create a measurable outcome that shows people are engaging with. I also think shopping local, so working with local retailers so that you drive an economic benefit locally. So, go to the greengrocers, go to your local greengrocers, and also buy, caddies that suit your kitchen from these kinds of people. Lists of local can mean that the shop local angle can be taken advantage of. That buy loose bit, is really interesting. I think there's also, we alluded earlier on to the behavioural connections. I think that meal plan bit, probably partnering with public health on, around weight loss campaigns or obesity campaigns, having that kind of dual outcome. A meal plan helps you control weight, but it also helps you reduce food waste. And I think, again, there's another, looking at food waste as being money out of your pocket or wasted money. That's a huge driver. Well, why not connect with cost of living campaigns, which, unfortunately are going to continue. There's lots of partnerships that can keep those behavioural prompts and reframe them all the time, rather than just that sort of recycling angle. What do you think, Dom?
Yeah, I think definitely, and it's always easier with all these campaigns if you do it in partnership with other departments, and then also you can sort of use different pots of money and leverage it all together. So that's a really good thing to do, definitely. So so what I was going to say is, which I suppose leads me neatly on to, if you do want to find out more about all things food waste, what I was saying earlier was a very brief whistle-stop tour. So I've got a new course coming up all about food waste. So whether you're introducing food waste collections, want to get your recycling rates up, want to encourage residents to reduce food waste, I'm running a new masterclass, starts in June, over 3 mornings, and basically run you through how to plan your food waste communications, apply behaviour change theory, evaluate it, all that kind of thing. So do scan the QR code and I'll email you more details if you're interested in that. But now I'm going to hand over to John Paul.
It's brilliant. So helping people help themselves, but also you are available to be brought in to work on campaigns. Speaking of campaigns, I wanted to share some examples of other campaigns, because one of the superpowers of being in the public sector is you can borrow from each other, and what's gone before can definitely be tapped into in terms of improving what you plan. So happy to send out links to all of these afterwards. But I wanted to look, we'll get to search data in a bit, at a couple of campaigns. This was a campaign run in Reading around launching a food waste initiative there, a collection service, just showing, defining the behaviour, explaining why it happens that way, showing images of the things that can be recycled: bones, meat, fish, cheese, all those sort of things. It's worth being clear in everything that you do, that point that Dominic made around consistency. And also we can see here, normally can, which ads resonated with people. And again, I can show all this data to you. So it's interesting to see what generated the highest click-through rates, what really resonated. I've got some other tips for helping these campaigns resonate as well. Just going to quickly shrink this because my wonderful sharing function doesn't let me flip between these things very easily. Also we've got wider recycling campaigns that look at food waste. This one from Hounslow had tons of variants, tons of different creatives in it, and you can see the data again here, which ads resonated, and we can sort of show with whom, and we can also look at search ads linked to food and waste and recipes. One targeting technique is to target sites like BBC Good Food and recipe sites around weekends to get people and prompt them to put the food caddy near them whilst they're cooking. There are all these wonderful ways of targeting the right message to the right person at the right time. So very, very happy to share all these with you. This was run by Veolia, who we hope will be sharing some of their campaigns with us on a future event. But again, really clear, vivid, beautifully designed, easy to consume, and animated to grab attention, and getting all the important points across. One of the advantages of video and animation is that you can cram a lot more information into people, especially when it's a relatively complex ask of people, and again, able to see the data behind those creatives, and we can share that with you. This was one run in Richmond that I thought was brilliant. Again, lots and lots of different adverts, lots and lots of different approaches, and behaviours being placed. So I mean, they sort of really threw the kitchen sink at this in terms of ideas. And again, you can see here which of those ads, sorry this takes so long to load, got the most kinds of interactions. And again, I'll share all this afterwards, but there are these common themes of sort of socially norming and specifying the behaviours that I think, when considered, showing explicitly what needs to happen and planting those in people's minds hundreds of thousands, millions of times, it's very important. So that's all available for you to look at and be inspired by. Just wanted to also look at search data for you. This is historic search terms related to waste primarily. So people looking, what we're looking at is when people type in certain terms across the UK over the past 3 years. So I've done this one for you on things like how people typing in recycling, bin collection, bin days, things like that. And you can see these peaks very interestingly in sort of December, January, which we can probably explain it, but they're looking at bin collection problem changes and things like that. We can also then zoom in on food waste. So what terms are people typing in? And you can, isolate individuals and see which there's things like questions, recycling bones and so on. But food waste is actually quite a high volume term. And if you want to understand what these volumes are in your area, I'm more than happy to run a localized report for you. But it helps you understand what's on people's minds, what are they thinking about, what questions are they asking, where's the uncertainty, and so on. And so you can really get a view on maybe what some of your creative messages need to say. Another great resource is Comms 2.0's, spell waste properly, the Comms file. So this is every award entry for the unawards over the past few years, and you can go in and see examples of what other authorities thought was worth winning an award for anyway, and again borrow tactics from there. All of these things are really meant to help you avoid doing things that waste time and budget, and give you multiple things that you can do to improve outcomes. So hopefully that's a quick whiz through. We'll share all the links to those afterwards.